Welcome to Truth in Life Today with Congregation Adat Ariel, Jewish believers in Jesus and teachers of spiritual warfare. If you'd like to speak with us tonight, call 618-924-1851. And now, here's the lovely and talented producer Deb.
Welcome to the Truth in Life broadcast, where we do our best every week to bring you a biblical perspective of the things we see going around us, and in the headlines around the world, in the same tradition established for this program by Rabbi Moshe Lori. I am producer Deb, and look who's joining me at the table tonight.
Richard Peck, glad to be here again.
And over here in the corner, this is Jim. And once again, everyone, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to give us a call at 618-924-1851.
And before we get started here, in case you have not heard, Bible teacher extraordinary Marilyn Hickey has passed away. She was 94 years old.
94.
And so it's like, well done, good and faithful service. I was blessed to see her twice, go to two of her Bible seminars in St. Louis. She's was quite an extraordinary teacher. Just really, um, you know, had a very, I don't know how you would say, crisp, concise way of putting her teachings out there. And so I learned a lot uh, from her, although later on I've learned more things, but she was one of the first to go through the entire Bible. And she said, "Yep, we're going to read the entire Bible this weekend." And she said, "We're going to trace the red thread." And what she meant was, she goes, "We're going to see the bloodline of the Messiah in every book of the Bible." She was one of the first people I ever heard talk about that.
Wow.
And so,
Cool.
yeah, and then we went through the book of Revelation with her as well. But and there was some things later on. It's like that I found. It's like, well, but she was the first person that I was able to clearly follow through a lot of this stuff. So
She was messianic when messianic wasn't cool.
yeah, and so she was. I don't even know if she realized she was teaching a messianic teaching. In her later years here, she went into a Muslim nation and had crusade type of meetings in a Muslim nation. People had visions of Jesus. People were healed in these Muslim nations. Now, I mean, she was a lady in her 80s. And they said at one point they had to basically throw her over a wall because they were going to come and try to attack her. So she did some
Daredevil work.
yeah, daredevil work in her later years. But she said, I love the Muslim people, and she was determined to take the word to them as well. So like I said, well done, good and faithful servant. And so Marilyn Hickey has passed on the age of 94. So I think that's quite something. So Richard is here with us. Give us an update on everything that's been going on with you and your lovely wife Nancy.
Well, my wife has had her kidneys fail, and she's in dialysis. She's in the hospital at the moment, and she also has a lot of ascites, so they got to take off like a liter or two a day when they do that. And today they did a dialysis on her and took off 2 liters of water.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
that's just part of the program when you get to that stage. So, but I think she's actually improving with the dialysis. So she looks stronger, feels stronger, and of course they're working her to death with therapy there 3 times a day. So it's strengthening her. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, there's rumors she might come out of the hospital next week.
Yeah, next Tuesday. Yeah,
next
she
Tuesday.
needs prayer. She's still sick, but appreciate your prayer for my wife. Thank you.
Yeah. And pray for Richard too, because it's pretty stressful having to deal with. I don't think you have to drive quite as far, but you still have to drive to the hospital almost
Right.
every day. So, but she allowed him to come here this evening.
That's right.
I imagine if she's getting awakened at 6 o'clock in the morning, she's ready to go to sleep now.
She's ready to go to bed real quick. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, pray for Nancy. At this point, a miraculous healing would be good,
Yes.
right? So, uh, going to jump into a couple things here, and of course you see the computer here, so we've got a Bible code or two to go over. But one of the things I want to talk about quickly, because I want to read a little bit in here. This is a book called Decoding the Prophet Jeremiah with Mark Biltz, and there's a couple things. We're going to read one thing, but I haven't been able to get much information about it, but what's coming up on May 17th, and I've known about this for a little while, but I haven't really seen what I call clear cut what's happening. They're going to do a dedication of the U.S. back to God. Now, the one article I could find about it was published by Regent University on March 3rd, and it's called the National Jubilee of Prayer 2026. Um, it's not the National Day of Prayer. That is May 7th. This is May 17th. So it says on February 5th, that was my birthday this year, President Donald J. Trump spoke at the 74th Annual National Prayer Breakfast in Washington, D.C. In his address, he centered his remarks on the role of faith in American life while unveiling a national call to prayer and thanksgiving as the nation approaches its 250th anniversary. Speaking to religious and political leaders from across the country, the president framed the breakfast as more than a long-standing tradition. He described it as a moment of spiritual significance and spoke about the connection between personal faith and national purpose. At the center of his remarks was a striking declaration: prayers strengthen, prayers heal, prayer empowers, and prayer saves. Quite simply, prayer is America's superpower. That conviction shaped one of the most significant announcements of the speech. The president revealed plans for a national gathering centered on prayer. As he explained, on May 17th, 2026, we are inviting Americans from all across the country to come together on our national mall to pray, to give thanks, and to rededicate America as one nation under God.
Yay!
And so the event is called the National Jubilee of Prayer, Praise, and Thanksgiving and is envisioned as a day of worship, reflection, and communal prayer. Organizers anticipate participants from every state gathering in Washington to give thanks for 250 years of providential history and to pray for the years ahead. The reason he's doing this is to counter what Barack Obama did when he was president by saying that we are no longer a Christian nation.
Right.
Yay!
So this is what, this is part of what this is. And it says here the timing of this invitation carries particular historical weight. In 1776, America's founders declared a commitment to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, grounded in truths they described as self evident and endowed by a creator. From the earliest days of the Republic, leaders have called the nation to prayer during pivotal moments. The Continental Congress proclaimed days of prayer and fasting during the Revolutionary War. Abraham Lincoln later called the country to prayer and thanksgiving during the Civil War. Public prayer has long accompanied sessions of national trial, gratitude, and renewal. As the nation approaches its 250th anniversary, this renewed call to prayer echoes that tradition. Again, like I said, this has been what was put out by Regent University. And so they say here for Christians seeking to engage fully in public life, events like this invite careful reflection. Scripture affirms the importance of corporate prayer and thanksgiving. Psalm 33:12 reminds us, "Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord." Similarly, 2 Chronicles 7:14 calls God's people to humble themselves, pray, seek his face, and turn from their ways. The apostle Paul urged believers to pray for those in authority so that people may live peaceful and godly lives. 1 Timothy 2:1-2. A national gathering devoted to prayer can reflect this biblical pattern of believers interceding for the welfare of their nation. At the same time, Scripture reminds Christians that their ultimate allegiance does not rest in any earthly leader. Jesus calls his followers to seek first the kingdom of God. Matthew 6:33. Prayer for a nation must always remain rooted in dependence on God rather than confidence in political power. And so anyway, that I got that on it, and then I don't remember where I found this. I think there is a website that if you type in, you have to type in May 17th. But it, and I don't think and this is a thing where they want you to RSVP. This is like it's like Freedom 250. I think it's like freedom250.org or something of that nature. But anyway, they say on Sunday, May 17th, 2026, the National Mall will be the scene of a historic gathering as Americans of every background across the country prepare for the nation's 250th birthday with scripture, testimony, prayer, and rededication of our country as one nation to God. From morning fellowship in front of the U.S. Capitol to an evening filled with music anchored at the main stage on 12th Street, Rededicate 250 will be rooted in giving thanks for God's presence in our national life through 250 years of American history and asking for his guidance for the next 250. Rededicate 250 will gather a broad assembly of voices united by a love of God and country. And I've got the list here. This is all the people and the speakers and the performers. Um, and it's going to include public servants and national leaders, House Speaker Mike Johnson, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Ambassador of Chief of Protocol of the United States Monica Crowley, former HUD Secretary Dr. Ben Carson, and Medal of Honor recipient Major General Patrick Brady, I'm sorry. He's the USA retired. Faith leaders from across faith traditions Bishop Robert Barron, Cardinal Timothy Dolan, Reverend Franklin Graham, Pastor Jack Graham, Pastor Jensen Franklin, Rabbi Meir Solovechek. I'm sorry if I messed his name totally. Pastor Gary Hamrick, Reverend Samuel Rodriguez, Pastor Jonathan Falwell, Pastor Lorenzo Sewell, Eric Metaxas, Sissy Graham Lynch, Abigail Robertson, Pastor Jonathan Pokluda, and Pastor Andy Frank, and military bands and choirs and celebratory units, and all of this that's going to be pulled out. Like I said, and they've got the whole schedule here of what all is going to happen all that day. Now, I mean, I think this is wonderful. It's incredible. It's fabulous. With a little caveat on my app. I got this. I've been reading, beginning to read this book, Decoding the Prophet Jeremiah with Mark Biltz, because I remember what happened after 9/11. That's been almost 25 years ago now.
Yep.
And a nation that was called together.
Yep.
Now this book, Mark is trying to make sense of everything of Jeremiah. And you'd have to understand that he was saying that if you read through Jeremiah, and I'm not real good at that, but he said you'll see that chapters and things are out of order because something will happen in one, and then later on it'll mention something, but you realize that something had to happen long before this other. So he's trying to put the books back in an order to make sense out of them, and that's what this book is about. Again, hence decoding the prophet Jeremiah.
Right.
But in this, he said, it says here, we've already discussed God was loudly speaking to the people, telling them to amend their ways. He even told them not to trust in the temple. Okay. Yet all they could repeat was the temple of the Lord over and over. God said those were lying words, lying, lying words. It was only if they thoroughly amended their ways, properly executing judgment, not oppressing the stranger, fatherless, or widow, not shedding innocent blood, and not walking after other gods, that he would allow them to stay in the land. Next, we find God asking the people whether they really believed they could steal, murder, commit adultery, swear falsely, and burn incense to Baal and other gods, and then stand before him, God, in the very house called by his name and say that they were delivered to do all these abominations. And the house called by his name had become a den of thieves. This was the very reference Yeshua used in his day about the rebuilt temple when he drove out all the money changers, exclaiming that his house was to be a house of prayer, but they had made it into a den of thieves.
Right.
I hear this comment all the time within Christianity today that people believe that they have been delivered to do every type of abomination because they are covered by the blood and the law has done away with. and the law is done away with. They have a big surprise coming. God told the people to take a look at what he did to Shiloh because of the wickedness of the people. Again, he told the people that he rose up early to speak to them, but they would not hear. He called them and they didn't answer. He said that therefore he would destroy the house called by his name in which they trusted. Very soon, God will judge the modern generation of believers who think the same way. It will be a case of, can you hear me now? God now wanted to bring out a very important point. He reminded them that when he delivered the people from Egypt, he didn't mention anything about burnt offerings or sacrifices. The only thing he commanded them was to obey his voice, and he would be their God, and they would be his people. The problem, though, is that they did not listen then, and they weren't listening now. They had been going backward and not forward. God then declared again that he even got up early, sending all of his prophets to them. Yet they refused to listen, followed the dictates of their own evil hearts, and went backward and not forward. All they did was stiffen their necks, doing worse than their fathers. God told Jeremiah to go ahead, speak these words to them, even though they wouldn't obey him. He told Jeremiah to give them a call, and he would see that they wouldn't answer him either. It's like God was asking Jeremiah to walk in his shoes and see how it felt. I don't think I can begin to fathom the extent of God's heartbreak as I cover what God revealed to Jeremiah about himself next. He described the evil that the children of Judah had done, not only by setting their detestable things within the very house called by his name, but also building the high places of Tophet in the Hinnom Valley, known as the Valley of Blood, to burn their own sons and daughters in the fire. God poured out his heart to Jeremiah, declaring he never commanded them to do that, and it never even entered his mind. In the Hinnom Valley, the fires were continually burning, and it became the garbage dump. It was also known as Gehenna or hellfire. We find Yeshua mentioning who the greatest were in the kingdom of heaven. He called a child to himself and stated that unless his followers became like little children, they couldn't enter the kingdom of heaven. He told them they better not offend one of these little ones. Then he said that if your hand or foot offends you, cut it off, for that would be better than to be cast into everlasting fire with both hands and feet. And if your eye offends you, cut it out, for it would be better than to be cast into hellfire with both eyes. And then again, he stated they better not despise one of the little ones, because the, their angels always behold the face of his Father in heaven. It was no accident that Yeshua mentioned Gehenna or hellfire in the context of condemning those who attacked children, treating them like garbage. They better be fearful because the children's angels are in face to face meeting with God. This pertains not only to the abortion issue, but the sexual abuse of children that is rampant everywhere today, even in the church. The word of the Lord came again to Jeremiah, saying that he was the potter and Israel was the clay in his hand, and that he could do whatever he pleased with the clay. As a matter of fact, all nations are but clay in his hands, and at the very instant he speaks against a nation to pluck it up, pull it down, or destroy it, if they repent, he will repent of the disaster he is sending. I say this because talking about this day of prayer, just like the Jews were doing, the temple will save us. The temples will save us. You know, we can do whatever we want, but the temple will save us. If the United States does not, if the public, if the people do not repent in their hearts, we can do these days of prayer till we're blue in the face.
Mm-hmm.
How much rampant stuff is going on? I mean, we had a government allow millions of people come over, and a lot of these children were lost and trafficked. And why? Because there is such a lust in this country from these sick jerks who want to have sex with children.
Yep.
And so, we can, and then of course, we see all of the everything that's being done in our politics, these people claiming that they're going to save the republic when actually everything that they're calling bad is actually good, and everything they're calling good is actually bad, and they have Trump derangement syndrome to the point that they want to see the man murdered. So we've got to have a genuine, I'm all for this day of prayer. Yes, we need to. But keep in mind that it's got to be from the heart of the country. The heart of the people have to change. And we saw a bunch of people that looked like they were contrite and repentant on 9/11. And here we are 25 years later, and Sharia law is rampant throughout New York
Yep. And Dearborn and
and
Texas.
Texas. And so, and all of these things. I've got an update on that here. I'll read in a second. But we really, really have to pay attention here because this is wonderful and I'm all for it. And, but we do have to pray intensely for a change of the heart of this nation because we can have days of prayer all we want and dedication. Like I said, I think the main purpose that Donald Trump wanted with this was to reverse the curse that
Mm-hmm.
Barack Obama spoke over this nation.
Yep.
And that's a good start.
Yep.
But we know from uh, uh, they were reading the Bible this past April. It was like they were going to read through the entire Bible. Even President Trump was filmed reading a passage out of the Bible. That was the big thing that they were doing. And I think they were doing that in conjunction with the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. And I saw a video of even Marty Getz. He was invited to read. Everybody was invited to read. You couldn't pick out what you wanted to read, but everybody was invited to read a portion of the Bible for the 250th anniversary, and everybody got involved. Right as that ended, I believe it was the April 25th. Right after that, that made Satan mad, and then we had this incident where this guy tried to assassinate Trump or tried to break in. Right when that finished.
Yep.
So spiritual warfare is exceptionally heavy.
It is.
But
It's run amok.
and Jonathan Kahn had told about that. Remember when we saw that Hindu god that was brought that there was they took they can put all of these things now in buildings that makes it looks like the building lights up with images. And in New York City on the Empire State Building,
It was on the
Yeah,
Empire
they had
State
yeah,
Building.
they had
Kali.
this,
They had Kali, the
Yeah.
the god of fertility.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then they had this arch that mysteriously showed up in one of the parks in New York.
Yeah.
Again, another arch that was dedicated to Baal worship. And so,
The Rainbow White House.
yep, the Rainbow Wine House. Lots of things that need to be reversed. And I know that these people are really in tune to that. I'm sure even Jensen Franklin is exceptionally in tune to this. But again, we need to have concerted prayer over this demonic that is gotten out of control and is allowed to go. I mean, as light as the light is, there's a whole lot of darkness, and it's going. We can't just um,
Well, when Jesus came the first time, the demonic came to the forefront. And it was very prevalent at that time.
mhm.
And then it sort of disappeared again over the last couple thousand years, but it's starting to reappear again now.
Yep.
As the second coming approaches, we're seeing a dramatic increase in demonic activity.
Right.
So,
So be in prayer about that. If you have the inkling and can go to Washington D.C. and join in, that's happening May 17th. And I believe, like I said, it's Freedom 250, like Freedom with the number 250.org or something of that nature, and you can RSVP. I believe that Flashpoint is going to be there. I would imagine this would be a big enough event that maybe even Fox News would cover a lot of it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if TBN is going to cover it. I don't, a lot of times they say, oh, yeah, we'll be sure and cover this. And then on the day of, you're looking, it's like, well, I don't see it anywhere.
Right.
Maybe will have something streaming online. Again,
C-SPAN may do it.
C-SPAN may do it. Somebody may do it. So it's just one of those things that you'll have to be on the lookout for if you want to see and know what's happening on that day. But speaking of that, like I said, Islam taking over. Here's an update from Kara News. I don't know. It's Caroline Love, and it's karanews.org. And I got this through Amir Sarfati because I hadn't heard about this, but it says a Travis County District Court has ordered the Texas Workforce Commission to comply with an agreement it made with the developer of a Muslim oriented community.
Hmm.
The Meadow, formerly known as Epic City, has been repeatedly targeted by Texas Governor Greg Abbott, Attorney General Ken Paxton, U.S. Senator John Cornyn, and other officials. Civil rights groups claim religious discrimination is behind the attacks on the housing development, which has not been built. The agency and the developer, Community Capital Partners, agreed last fall to resolve allegations of fair housing violations against the project. Community Partner Capital Partners sued the Texas Workforce Commission after it sent the commission fair housing policies for the development, but didn't receive any review or response from the agency, according to a press release from the developer. The proposed housing community, a 402-acre development in unincorporated Collin and Hunt counties, roughly 40 miles northeast of Dallas, near the city of Josephine. The project is years away from construction, but has already faced intense scrutiny from top Republicans in the state. Texas officials have accused the development of implementing Sharia law and creating a no go zone for non Muslims, something the developer has repeatedly denied. Imran Chaudhary, the president of Community Capital Partners, praised the court's ruling in a press release. This ruling confirms what we have maintained from the beginning, that Community Capital Partners has been willing, ready, and committed to complying with Texas law at every step, says CCP President Imran Chaudhary. We have acted in good faith through this process, and today's decision reflects that. The Texas Workforce Commission told Kara via email it plans to appeal the court's ruling. The court's ruling is flawed and overlooks substantial evidence of violations under the Fair Housing Act, a spokesperson for the agency said. The spokesperson pointed to an ongoing U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development investigation of alleged fair housing violations. The U.S. Department of Justice closed a similar probe last year after the developer affirmed it planned to comply with the Fair Housing Act requirements. The Texas Workforce Commission's lack of response was more than routine delays, said Eric Hudson, a civil rights attorney for the developer of Hudson, accused the agency of discriminating against the project because of its Muslim affirmation. For months, state actors created the impression that this project was operating outside the law, when in reality, CCP was doing exactly what was required. He said today's ruling makes it clear that the law applies equally to state agencies. So they are going to go ahead with their Epic City, now renamed the Meadow. And as I explained before, they have passed anti Sharia laws in Texas. But what do? They just simply rename it. So they will go ahead and try to get laws through. It just won't be called Sharia laws, but they'll still try to get laws passed to go ahead and implement their Sharia tactics.
Right.
Tequila.
So, anyway, but this is what's going ahead. Just wanted to let you know, if you are in Texas, that, you know, we've got judges that, I mean, these people are smart and they know the law. And so they come in and they circumvent our law, or they can use it against us. We'll have to see what happens there. But so they score one for the Muslims this time. They're going to be able, I guess, to go ahead with building this situation. So
Well, if it's it kind of goes along with what producer Deb was saying, and I want to rephrase it a little bit. We as a Christian nation were ripe for the picking because there's fewer and fewer of us. You think that if you think this would be happening, say 40 years ago, 50 years ago, it wouldn't see the light of day.
Right.
And it's because we have gone demonic as a culture. And I'm talking about American culture.
secularized.
We've secularized. Yes, that's a perfect word for it. And it's like I said, if we don't, like she said, if we don't change, if the spirit in this country does not change, they're going to take over.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's not going to be ifs, ands, or buts about it. They're right. I'm in the 1970s. I know there'd be torches and pitchforks.
Right.
So.
Jonathan Tobin here has an opinion piece: who's to blame for declining American support for Israel? Well, this is one of our problems here right? When you have fewer and fewer what you could call uh, mainline Christians, uh, you know, there's an off brand now of Christianity. Um, these people who claim to be Christians, people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, but yet they are pro-Palestinian and anti-Israel.
Anti-Semitic.
They're anti-Semitic. This is Jonathan S. Tobin. He says the shift in U.S. public opinion is real and can't be denied, though polls still show a plurality of Americans are still on the side of the Jewish state, and that the alliance with Washington was never stronger. The decline in overall support has been precipitous. Now that's a good word, plurality, and that means that's what happened. Hillary Clinton tried to say she got the majority of the votes,
Right.
but still, but Trump won. No, no. I mean, on the popular vote, she got a plurality. In other words, it was evidence of a divided nation. Maybe she got 51% popular vote and he got 49. It's a plurality, not a majority. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So this is what we've got. We've got this divided nation showing up here again. Since the Hamas led Palestinian Arab terror attack on Israeli communities on October 7th, 2023, growing numbers of Americans, especially among the young, have decided that the Israelis are the perpetual bad guys in the ongoing conflict with the Palestinians. The joint U.S. Israeli efforts to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon may have only accelerated this trend, and the accompanying surge in anti Semitism that has made itself felt in public discourse, as well as on college campuses and in the streets of American cities. You'll notice on this argument that goes on with the progressives and the Democrats, oh, this was an unfounded war. America's gotten into this war with Iran and there was no reason to, and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
uh, Totally disregarding the fact that Iran was, through their proxies, lobbing bombs at Israel then eventually, and at other Muslim nations that were supposed to be their friends all over that region.
Yeah.
Oh, but there's really no reason that we should be doing this.
Right.
Oh, man. But anyway, um, it says here that predictably, this has led to a continual stream of articles from a variety of sources in the secular press and the Jewish world purporting to explain why this has happened. Some come from outlets that are intrinsically hostile to Israel and celebrate the collapse of what was once considered a bipartisan pro Israel consensus. Others speak of this change with regret and claim to be motivated by a desire to make Israel popular again. But most of all, but almost all of them are wrong. The mistake is not in recognizing that a problem exists. Rather, it is in imagining that there is much that the state of Israel or its U.S. supporters can do about it. As with most discussions of anti Semitism, which is what the increase in anti Zionism truly is, the error is in assuming that the critiques of Israel are rooted in what it does or doesn't do. Israel's leaders and government are as flawed as those of any other country. But the shift in public opinion is a product of changes in American society, not the mistakes or even the alleged crimes committed by Israelis.
Hmm.
Accepting this terrible truth is as difficult for Israelis and their Jewish supporters as solving the intractable policy dilemmas that Jerusalem faces. Yet accept it they must if they are to avoid compounding the problem by making further blunders that will only make the situation worse. Ironically, many Israeli and American Jews have internalized some of the most unfortunate tropes of traditional anti Semitism. Jew haters on the right and the left have treated the objects of their abhorrence as if they had supernatural powers to do harm to them. Marxists have imagined them as the not so secret force behind the alleged evils of capitalism, colonialism, and imperialism. Right wingers have conceived of them as the masterminds of a global Marxist plot against their national existence or their faith. Many adopt the self contradictory claims of the protocols of the elders of Zion forgery, in which they are somehow part of both conspiracies.
Right.
For all of their justified scorn for the calumnies of anti Semites, The truth is that many Jews have accepted this mindset, attributing to themselves the power to fix insoluble problems and to persuade people with minds that can't be changed to see reason. And of course, we would include, the demonic, that's coming in here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just as many, if not most, Israelis and Jews once thought they had the power to win over the Palestinians via goodwill and far reaching concessions, some are now ready to believe that they have the power to change American public opinion. They think that a change in government, a willingness to stop defending themselves, or even by adopting clever public relations strategies, the downward trend in support can be halted, if not reversed. Of course, many have also finally come to grips with the fact that the conflict with the Palestinians can't be ended even by the most generous of peace offers. As such, they ought to understand that the dynamic with respect to the successful mainstreaming of anti Zionism is similar. Israelis don't have this power. They never have and never will. To point this out is not to say that Israel can't do better at explaining itself to the world, or at least try to do so. Certainly, the current government and its predecessors haven't consistently put forth much of an effort to do so. Nor is it the case that Israeli governments haven't made mistakes. They have, and big ones, like any other government, including the world's other democratic states. But when you seriously examine the efforts to apportion blame for the current downturn in Israeli popularity, the explanations the critics provide are either inadequate or lead nowhere. Some blame Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for alienating Americans because of what they consider to be the extremism of his governing coalition or the policy it pursues. They say Israel has become too right wing, nationalist, and religious on his watch. They point to any infraction as corruption. They attribute it to statements of cabinet members like Itamar Ben Gavir or Bezalel Smotrich, or the alleged bad behavior of the Jews living in Judea and Samaria, settlers in the West Bank, or the rare Israeli soldiers who do something indefensible, like the one who desecrated a cross in Lebanon. Others say Israel blundered by adopting a transition or transactional approach to the United States. According to this argument, embracing Republicans, especially Donald Trump, ooh, a little bit of Trump derangement syndrome in here, huh?
Yep.
While taking umbrage at the Democrats' position was mistaken. The pro Israel community's willingness to be too critical of former President Barack Obama over his 2015 Iran nuclear deal and of President Joe Biden for his half hearted backing of the war against Hamas and slow walking and even denial of the supply of weapons during the conflict was, we are told, a misjudgment.
Mm-hmm.
By applauding and working with Trump, the Israelis are alleged to have made a deal with the devil that will come back to haunt them when the Democrats inevitably come back into power. Belief in this thesis has only grown since Trump's decision to join with Israel in attacking Iran, which the war's critics blame on Netanyahu dragging him into a conflict that they assert isn't popular or in America's interests. Oh, yeah. Iran getting a nuke, that's perfectly fine, to these people.
They'd use it immediately.
Hmm. Most of all, they assert that the war Israel waged on the Hamas perpetrators of October 7th's atrocities was too brutal and killed too many civilians in Gaza, where terrorists rule over some 2 million people. They make the same claims about efforts to prevent Hezbollah operatives in Lebanon from making northern Israel uninhabitable or to forestall Iran's desire to eradicate the Jewish state. It is, they believe, all about the genocide Israel is supposedly committing against the Palestinians. You see, they drop that word genocide with Israel so easily. They won't put the same word with Iran or Hezbollah or Hamas. They
Right.
won't use the word with them.
Right.
Um,
Right there, it shows the bias.
it says here, so while these arguments make sense to Israel's critics, they have it all wrong. The rise of the right in the Jewish state wasn't the product of a reactionary impulse within Israeli society. If Netanyahu, the Likud, and its coalition partners have won most of the elections during the course of the last quarter century, it's because the peace process championed by the Labor Party and the left wing was exposed as a dangerous delusion. The Palestinians refused multiple offers of statehood in much, if not almost all, of the territory they claim, And yes, they were offered these options for statehood. That destroyed the center left's hold on much of the Israeli electorate. That and Palestinian support for terrorism during the years of violence associated with the Second Intifada from the year 2000 to 2005 and the atrocities of October 7th ended the belief in the possibility of a two-state solution among the overwhelming majority of the Israeli public. Kind of funny, we're not even talking about that right now, are we? No two-state solution. And to focus on alleged settler violence or other outlier actions is also to ignore the reality in which Israelis live. Even if a tiny minority of Israelis does things they shouldn't, the entire discussion of such crimes is premised on the willingness to ignore the daily toll of the Palestinian terrorism that exists in the territories. Nor is the problem the things said by Ben Gvir or Smotrich. Israelis would choose peace even at the cost of territory if they could. But you have to be disconnected from the reality of the Middle East to deny that the century old war against the Jewish presence in the country is inextricably linked to the national identity of the Palestinians. There is no Palestinian partner for peace and won't be one until their political culture undergoes a sea change in which they reject violence and accept the Jews aren't going to be wiped out or to go away. I will put this insert here that I mean they have offered them a state. The only thing they had to do was to agree that Israel had
Right.
the right to its state, and they won't do it.
They won't do it.
Those Americans who cling to ideas like two states or imagine that there's anything conceivable the Israeli government can do to persuade the Palestinians to end the war simply haven't been paying attention to the events of the last 25 years or choose not to do so for reasons of their own. And that's mainly the thing. Israelis remain divided on whether they want Netanyahu to continue leading them after a total of 18 years in power. But they are not divided on the necessity of wars their country has fought against Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran. The same critiques used against Netanyahu will be employed against his political opponents should they prevail in the elections that will be held in Israel later this year. Nor should anyone upbraid Israelis for embracing Trump. It was not Netanyahu and Israel that turned on the Democrats. It was the Democrats who had increasingly abandoned the Jewish state. In the last generation, the Democrat Party, joined by the education system, the media, and the arts, has been largely taken over by woke ideologies. The long march of the progressives through these institutions has helped indoctrinate a generation in the toxic ideas of critical race theory, intersectionality, and settler colonialism that all falsely label Israelis and Jews as white oppressors.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
As such, everything they do is considered wrong, and everything their opponents, who are according to the status of the oppressed people of color and perpetual victims, do is deemed defensible, no matter how wrongheaded or evil. The belief that has filtered throughout the political system in ways that no amount of Israeli concessions or outreach can alter. Israelis can do more to explain the realities of the Middle East to an American public that knows little of their own history, let alone that of the Jewish state and the Palestinians. But clever messaging, better use of social media, or attempts to change the subject to a discussion of the great things Israeli genius has provided to the world are incapable of convincing those who have been taught to believe Zionism is racism to think otherwise. And that's what's happening, right? While this was going on, the vast majority of Republicans remained pro Israel and hostile to its Islamist enemies. Trump chose to be the most pro Israel president to sit in the White House since the founding of the modern day Jewish state. He has done so because he correctly views the alliance with Jerusalem to be in his nation's best interests and believes that stopping Iran is similarly essential to American security. The notion that Israelis and pro Israel American Jews should have nevertheless rejected him is nonsensical. Only a nation of fools would embrace its foes and give the back of its hand to its friends. Nor can Israel win back friends or lessen hostility by committing less genocide or being kinder to its enemies. I mean, do we remember how Israel would, they bump bomb buildings before they're going to destroy them so everybody will get out?
Yeah.
They'll warn them, they'll send pamphlets and leaflets, we're going to destroy this territory, you better get out.
Democrats don't do that. They make sure the building's full before they
Right.
attack.
Yeah, and so, it's just like the the correspondence dinner.
That's right. They want to make sure the whole thing. I want to get a. I mean, it's what the Democrats are doing is an Islamic tactic. They made sure that the Twin Towers were full before they bombed it, and now the Democrats are making sure with their terrorist tactics that the venues are full when they attack.
Right. So, and it just was a miracle of God that that the Twin Towers were not full. There was like over close to 3,000 people lost, but
But they
uh,
were they
but
were full before they evacuated them. They were about
no, not that
second.
morning. That was the amazing miracle. They
Oh,
said
good.
that people kept coming up and saying they were late to work. They didn't get to the building. That building should have had tens of thousands of people in it, and it
Right.
didn't.
Yeah,
There
I
was
thought a lot of
3,000.
people had escaped though after
Well,
the
I mean,
first.
yeah, a lot had escaped, but they said that the thing that worked in their advantage was that it wasn't full.
Yeah.
It was
Well,
amazing.
praise God for that.
Yeah, because Tuesday morning it should have been packed
Yeah.
with people,
Yeah, it should have been popping. Yeah.
but it wasn't. So, um, and they said that was only. But again, tragedy. There was a lot of people killed in it, but that
Yeah.
you have no concept of how big those buildings were.
Right.
I don't remember how many people at any one time that could be in those buildings, but yeah, it was. In fact, I had a friend. I have a friend who she was, I guess, supposed to go on that New York trip. She and her cousin, she has pictures from her cousin taking pictures in the World Trade Center, and it was like less than a year before this happened.
Mm-hmm.
And in the pictures, you can see all of the people that were in there as tourists. You could go in there and as tourists, that was a big, huge tourist thing, just
Sure.
like the Empire State or any of the
Seemed
buildings
to me
there.
it was 50,000 with both towers.
Yeah, I think so. At anyone, and so, but that morning, there should have, yeah, a lot of people escaped or were not up and they could get out, but it should have been wall to wall people, and it wasn't that day. Not sure why.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember. But anyway, we're back to this. It says that he's talking about nor can Israel win back friends or lessen hostility by committing less genocide or being kinder to its enemies. That's because Israel has not embraced a harsh form of militarism or committed genocide in Gaza or anywhere else. To the contrary, it is the Iran backed foes, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, and their foreign cheerleaders and enablers that seek the destruction of the one Jewish state on the planet and the consequent genocide of half of all of the global Jewish population. The Israel Defense Forces employ rules of engagement and policies that do more to avoid civilian casualties than any other army. The casualties in Gaza are the result of Hamas leaders' own effort to sacrifice the population in their midst. The fact is that up to half of those killed are Hamas operatives, meaning that the ratio of civilians to combatants killed is lower than that of any urban combat in modern history. Also, thing to remember is most of these people they're calling civilians are fully back Hamas.
Yeah.
The only alternative to the policies Israel has pursued in Gaza, Lebanon, or Iran is to sit simply back and allow the genocidal terrorists who committed the October 7th atrocities the impunity to do so again at a time of their choosing. That is something no rational government would do. Israel tried during the 17 years that Hamas has ruled Gaza as an independent Palestinian state in all but name to live with this murderous regime. The country learned on October 7th that this was a mistake that would be paid for in the blood spilled during the largest mass slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust. What those liberal journalists, foreign policy establishment pundits, and the Democrat activists and politicians who criticize Israel's war policies apparently want is for the Jewish state to repeat the same blunder, regardless of the cost in Jewish lives. It is time to recognize that the problem isn't with Israel, but with its critics. More to the point, the issue is the woke war on the West. Oh, yes. In everything, right?
Yep.
That has influenced a generation of young people to see Israel, Zionism, and the Jewish rights as somehow illegitimate. Nor is this limited to the political left. The same people who hate Israel tend to also take a dim view of America's role in world affairs, as is the case with every other anti Semitic conspiracy theory embraced by the left or the right. The issue isn't what the Jews have or haven't done. The problem is the lies and distortions that anti Semites believe. Israelis and Jews want to feel that they have the power to alter the situation with gestures, policies, or even just expressions of goodwill. That apparently can't happen. Still, it's wrong to blame them for the delegitimization and demonization of their nation and its rights. What can Israelis and the pro-Israel community do about this? They have the power to stand with their friends and make themselves as strong as possible. They can make alliances wherever possible with those who want to be their friends and be more skillful in putting their best foot forward to the world, while explaining the facts about the conflict in which they are stuck wherever possible. They can support those seeking to defend the values of the West and the Judeo-Christian heritage that is the foundation of American democracy, as well as Zionism. Equally important would be for the Friends of Israel to stop the breast beating about their supposed sins and start playing offensive by pointing out the lies being told about them. Yes, that would help. In particular, those who care about Israel and the fact here's a big lie. Let's do away with the fact that there is anything that has ever been or ever will be called Palestine.
Right.
There was never Palestine,
Nope.
and there was never a Palestinian people.
Right.
Nope.
So let's do away with that lie first.
I mean, the guy who started it, he was from Egypt,
Yes.
Yasser Arafat. So, yeah, I mean,
And he
it's,
was told that and instructed that by I found out by the Russians.
yeah, he wasn't born a Palestinian, you know. So
No.
that's a made up word that became mainstream here in the last 50, 60 years.
Yeah, if you repeat a lie long enough,
It becomes the truth.
it becomes the truth. So,
I find it great that you think that the Democrats are worse than Osama bin Laden. That's pretty cool.
Yes. But anyway, in particular, those who care about Israel and the facts should support independent media outlets and tell the truth about the conflict, like the Jewish News Syndicate here, rather than those that mainstream anti Semitic pro Hamas propaganda. The information war that is being waged against Israel and the Jews is exacting a price in isolation that is far from insignificant. But the price of losing the actual war on the ground against genocidal terror regimes would be far higher. And those who counsel Israel to adopt policies that would lead to such a defeat are neither well meaning nor wise. It's time for supporters of Israel to stop internalizing the false arguments that their opponents seek to impose on them. Israel isn't perfect and doesn't have to be, but blaming it for the lies and acceptance of beliefs antithetical to Jewish life and the survival of Western civilization itself is neither logical nor productive. It means blaming the victims for the crimes of their persecutors. That's a strategy that never worked throughout the millennia of Jewish history, and it won't do so now. So this is by Jonathan S. Tobin. He's the editor in chief of the Jewish News Syndicate. So
That's very cool.
yeah. So anyway, that's that. Wanted to say praise about the prayers for the weather. We had some bad weather that was supposed to really break out on us on Monday and into Tuesday as well. And of course, I kept saying, sending out the prayer requests, no severe here, no severe here is what they're saying, but no severe here. And they kept saying, the National Weather Service and the Storm Prediction Center had issued over Southern Illinois here what they call a PDS, a particularly dangerous situation. Never happened. And then I saw the next day or so later, after the storms had passed through, all of the meteorologists, most of them on television, trying to explain why it didn't happen.
Yeah, we dodged a bullet.
Yeah, yeah. And so God put the best way that I can explain it is God put a cap over our atmosphere. Now you sometimes maybe you have heard on television some of the meteorologists say, well, we have blown the cap and the storms are forming, right? But a cap is a warm layer up in the atmosphere that inhibits storm development. And it would take too long for me to go into it right now as to how the atmosphere needs to be stacked for that to happen. But we had a cap in place, and then there were instability factors that just didn't. We had all these other very dangerous parameters there, that anything excuse me, in any other situation it should have fired off some pretty significant storms. And but there were a couple inhibiting things in there. And so thank you for the prayers if you prayed for us,
We
because
were a 3, right? As far as the outlook, 3.
it went up briefly to 4.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, they issued what they called a PDS, which doesn't happen very often. And one of the girls that was a meteorologist on one of those television stations at the same time I was, of course, she stayed in television a lot longer, but she was saying that she has never seen that happen, where they issue a PDS and Storm Prediction Center goes as high as they do, and nothing happened.
God's in charge.
Yep, he is. So
He
praise the
sort of
Lord.
he calmed the sea, didn't he?
Yes,
Yeah.
he did.
Yeah.
So
He
just
can.
wanted to point that out. And it's been a couple weeks since our friend has been here, and we have a couple Bible codes that I think I mentioned one week, but it's better with when Richard's here and he can explain them or do the best that he can to
Do
explain
the best I can to explain them because sometimes I can't explain them.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Well, this one here is entitled Mystery, Gog, and Magog in the Bible Code. And it's very interesting. And it talks about Mongolia, which of course is a northern part of China. And China, of course, is getting very close to Iran right now. So it would make sense that China and Iran and Russia would all work together, and that's exactly what they're doing right now. And this is what the Bible code is explaining. So we're going to start this here, and I'm going to turn the sound down because we don't need the sound. All they're doing is playing music. But there's several things that we need to read to you. It says here that Mongolia is the land between Russia to the north and China to the south. Mongolia nomads were often referred to as Gog and Magog. The Quran refers to them as Yajud and Majud. I'm not sure how that's pronounced. Yajud up here. I can't.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, Juge and Majuge, I guess.
Juj and Majud, yeah.
Yeah.
And here's an overview. The Great Wall of China was often identified in medieval European times and Islamic literature as the uh, part, ramparts of Gog and Magog. So my Bible commentaries or commentators see Gog and Magog to the final conflict and as a final coalition of evil forces from the north coming against the Israel in the last days. So that's essentially what he's saying here about that. And so we'll go ahead and start this now. He is just giving an update.
Now this is kind of like this is talking about, I guess, what Ezekiel 38 and 37,
It's a,
38 and
yeah.
39. So
And so it says, a great and mighty army against my people Israel in the last days, from the north, the south, the east, and the way of the sea, which is the west.
right, they're talking about the Mediterranean Sea.
Right. It's called the Great Sea
Mm-hmm.
in the Bible times.
Mm-hmm.
So here we have Russia and Mongolia. Iran just was added.
Yeah, which is a key thing to think. Everybody wants peace with Iran and thinks we can do something about Iran and make it everything in Bible prophecy is lending itself to think that it doesn't look like we're going to see
Right.
much of a change.
Here we have North Korea is involved. Iran and the Brotherhood, the Muslim Brotherhood is involved.
Right.
So again, I'll stop this for a second to read this. It says here Ezekiel 38:15 runs throughout this code, and it reads, as they go through the land, and one of them sees a human bone, he will set it up. He will set up a marker beside it until the gravediggers have buried it in the valley of Hamongog, and also a town called Hamanah. Anyway, he's saying that Gog and also, actually, if you combine those two words there, it means Gog, Magog.
Yeah.
So,
That's one of those weird things that happens in Hebrew.
yeah,
Um, that's where the word Gog and Magog can show up simultaneously with the words that are actually there.
right. So here again we have China, Russia, in the last days, Gog or Magog, Gog. War, it says there's going to be a war. And this gets more interesting as it goes along against my people Israel. And we're coming up on some of the most interesting parts of this Bible code. And here we have Obama is mentioned, the USA, and Donald. It almost hints at the fact that this is going to take place while Donald Trump is in office. Ezekiel 38, verses 16, 17, and 18, the Gog Magog war, run through this code. And the world translated as writing, the word translated as writing also means vehicular. And he's talking about this word up here, and it can be either riding, can also mean vehicular. So riding vehicular trucks. And here we see it's going to be a quake. Muslims are involved, quaking and quake. And it says in the last days that there's going to be quaking going on during this thing. And hordes are mentioned. America, the nations are involved. And America is involved. Korea and the Muslims, the Muslim hordes, and Obama is mentioned 5 times. Obama's got something to do with all this.
Mm-hmm. He seems like he's in the background now,
Yeah.
but he always pops out. If you'll notice, like when things happen,
right.
He's been speaking. Once again, he's talking against everything that he had said.
Right.
He's saying now, oh, this is terrible what's happened against Iran. But before he was one that they played videos of him saying that Iran can't have a bomb.
War, 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 war. War is mentioned 9 times. And Iran is mentioned, Islam is mentioned, and quaking is mentioned. Mongolia could have been, or it could have been, the geographical location of the warlike people of the land of Magog and Gog, warlords and leaders. Today, they lend their names to the coalition of forces that will come against Israel.
Hmm.
So
It's interesting. I can't help but think that what's going on right now is a lead up to the structure. And if Iran was allowed to just keep going in the direction they were going, they could, if they could have gotten a nuke, could have had power over everything in the Middle East. And so I kind of see a little bit of a thing about the development here of the fact
we
that
got one more, Jim.
there's another.
So we have another one called Epic Fury.
Yeah.
Of course, that was the code name of the attack on Iran, was called Epic Fury.
What I was going to say about what was I going to say here about the fact that it would make sense if we do weaken Iran's ability, that's why they pull Russia in, because they haven't got the ability anymore, or not the ability to make as much money anymore to afford their campaign, and they have to have help from Russia
Or China.
or China
Yeah.
coming in. So it would make sense. But,
Well, you've also got you mentioned Obama a while ago. Valerie Jarrett was his back channel during the Biden administration, talking, doing all the negotiating for Iran.
Right.
And we know that Valerie Jarrett has Iranian ties.
Right.
Mhm.
So I mean, it's all one big circle,
Mhm.
and and everybody, well, Obama's a Christian. He is not. His middle name's Hussein. He is a Muslim,
Right.
and Valerie Jarrett is a Muslim.
Right.
So, they were flying all these people in that are trying to take over this country right now. They started it.
Mhm.
So, it's a tangled web.
Yep.
And, Deb talks about spiritual warfare. That's where it all started.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and play this. And
Up. You want to stay up on the table here?
trying to keep it on the table. Okay, now it's going. And this is a lion. Now,
That's a lot of lions.
a lot of lions here. Now, that was the code name for Israel
Yes.
of this. The United States code name was Epic.
Epic Fury. I can't remember if it was Operation Rising Lion
Rising Lion, I think it was.
or which one it is now. Um,
So now it says the mullahs, the clerics burn. The fire of God is fallen from the sky. So I'm thinking it's talking about the bombs that are falling right now during Epic Fury. And this is in quotes, and it says, fury in my face. But God is saying that. It's fury in my face. America is involved. Israel is involved. And notice the date, the 28th of February, 2026. That's pretty weird. This was written thousands of years ago, and God wrote the exact date that this war started, the exact date that Ayatollah Khomeini was killed.
amen. Yep.
Yeah.
It says here that I think that currently the one that goes with Operation Epic Fury is Operation Roaring Lion.
Roaring Lion.
The one that the first Iran was, I think, Operation Rising Lion.
Okay.
So, but
Okay. Well, here we have atomic power. Now, that's what they're fighting this war over is atomic power.
mm-hmm.
And they don't want Iran to get atomic power. So keep in mind, this was written thousands of years ago. God knew exactly what was going on thousands of years ago.
And if you haven't joined us before, Bible codes are equal line sequencing of letters within
Equidistance.
equidistance letter sequencing in the scrolls, in the Torah scrolls.
It says you merchandise your I forgot, so I didn't get it read fast enough. Now here's a very interesting screen here. It says Iran shipping ×3 passing through the paths of the sea. That's what we're experiencing right now.
Yep.
Is they're experiencing the blockade where they're passing through the Hormuz Strait there, and it's in a minute here it's going to come up a blockade. Shipping is being stopped, and there it is right there. Blockade in black. Blockade in black.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing that God knew all this thousands of years ago. Yeah. And here is really interesting. Hanging gallows. Hanging gallows. These girls and people over there are being hung by the Iranian regime.
Right. They've had the young player.
Yeah.
He was hung.
They're executing these people publicly. And here's the girl that they hung right there.
Mm-hmm.
And a 16-year-old I can't even pronounce, Shalia, was hung by the Iranian regime. Her crime was that she was raped.
Yep.
It wasn't her fault that she was raped, but
That's what they do. They blame
yeah,
they
they
blame
blame the
her.
girls. So anyway, again, this was written thousands of years ago. It's unbelievable. And people say this couldn't possibly be true. Yeah, right.
Equal letter distance sequencing.
Right. A
So
grievous evil. Yeah. The mullahs and the clerics. Those are the people that are responsible for the war there in Iran.
yep. And the
And
IRGC
God
and all of
says,
the
prepare to meet your God.
yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the end of it.
Yep.
So, one thing I want to say about this is that I want to explain that equal letter distance sequencing. Um, that is a situation like one of the early rabbis that decided to look this up and see what a rabbi in the 17th century said. His name was the Vilna Gaon. He's known as the genius from the village of Vilna. And he wrote about this in the 1700s that he had discovered some words that were hidden in the Bible. And what he said was everything that's ever happened and everything that ever will happen, every person that's ever been born, every person that will be born, his birth dates and his death dates are all in the Bible, in the Torah. And another man in the 1940s decided to look this up, and he went into Genesis and found that every 50th Hebrew letter in Genesis spells out Torah. He found the same thing in Exodus. He found the same thing in Numbers and Deuteronomy. And he couldn't find anything in Leviticus at first, and he went back and looked in Leviticus, and he found that every seventh letter spelled out the sacred name of God, the Tetragrammaton, Yuv Hev Vav Hev. So that's what you meant when we're talking about equal letter distance sequencing.
Mm-hmm.
These are hidden. Sometimes they're 50 letters apart. Sometimes they're 2 letters apart. Sometimes there's no letters apart. It's just a solid line
Mm-hmm.
of a scripture that talks about a particular problem that's going on right
Right.
now.
Right.
Okay, so
And talking about this particular problem,
yeah,
evidently, of course, they keep saying, well, Trump wants a deal. Trump wants a deal. He wants to block the strait. But I didn't get where it was at, but I think the UAE has told everyone who is a citizen of the UAE to get out of Iran. Seems that Trump is being briefed on Iran military options. He posted today an interesting Truth Social with a picture of him holding a gun with like a apocalyptic scene behind him, saying, and he said underneath it, "No more Mr. Nice Guy."
yeah.
So it says here President Donald Trump is expected to receive a briefing on plans for potential renewed military action against Iran on Thursday. Sources with knowledge of the matter told Axios the United States Central Command has prepared a plan for a short and powerful wave of strikes, likely including the Islamic Republic's key infrastructure, in hopes of breaking the stalemate in the talks, the outlet cited three sources as saying. So they're getting word in the Middle East get out of Iran, stay away from Iran. The other options include an operational takeover of part of the Strait of Hormuz and reopen it to commercial shipping, and a special forces raid to secure Iran's highly enriched uranium, according to Axios. Joint Chiefs Chairman General Dan Kane and CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper are expected to attend Thursday's deliberations. Two sources told Axios that while Trump sees the blockade as Washington's primary source of leverage in the negotiations, he would consider military action if the Islamic regime will still not concede. The U.S. military planners are considering the possibility that Tehran will attack forces in the region in retaliation for the naval blockade. The report noted Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Mojtaba Khomeini posted a series of tweets on X on Thursday claiming that a new day is dawning when America's bases in the regions can't defend themselves, let alone their local allies. A new chapter for the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz is unfolding, the leader of the Islamic Republic tweeted. Today, it has been proven to not only the global public opinion, but even to the rulers of countries that the U.S.'s presence and establishment in the Persian Gulf is the main source of instability in the region, he added. The U.S.'s flimsy bases lack the resilience and capability even to ensure their own security, let alone provide any hope for U.S.'s dependents and the U.S. worshippers in the region. Um, Trump told reporters in the Oval Office on Wednesday that at this moment there will never be a deal unless they agree there will never be no nuclear weapons. The talks with Tehran have come a long way. He said the question is whether or not they're going to go far enough. The president warned earlier on Wednesday that Iran better get smart soon, saying the mullahs don't know how to sign a non nuclear deal to end the war. Iran can't get their act together, Trump wrote on Truth Social, posting an edited picture of himself walking through a war torn scene with explosions behind him while holding a rifle. That's the one I was talking about. No more Mr. Nice Guy, the image caption read. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt told reporters in Washington on Monday that Trump's red lines for a deal with Iran have been made very, very clear following Tehran's latest proposal to end hostilities. Under the Islamic Republic's plan, the regime would open the Strait of Hormuz in exchange for a long term ceasefire or permanent end to the war. A U.S. official and two sources with knowledge of the matter told Axios. Nuclear negotiations would only start at a later stage after the U.S. military lifts its blockade of Iranian ports, according to the reported details of the proposal. Washington has repeatedly stressed that the nuclear issue must be dealt with from the onset, and Trump was unhappy with Tehran's offer for that reason. A U.S. official briefed on the deliberations at the White House told Reuters. CNN cited a source familiar with the matter as saying that the president was unlikely to accept the plan as soon as it could remove a key piece of the American leverage in the talks. So, um, yeah, this is what's going on now. In this situation, CENTCOM prepares. Oh, that was from the. Yeah, it says CENTCOM prepares short and powerful wave of strikes on Iran. Um, The Iran war, which remains unpopular in the U.S., has shaken markets and raised oil prices. The war has brought traffic to through the strait, a choke point for about 20% of global oil and liquefied natural gas shipments, close to a standstill. Washington hopes to make Iran more flexible at the negotiating table on nuclear issues. Another option might come up in the briefing with special forces to secure Iran's stockpile of highly enriched uranium. My question keeps being, um, why won't they take that Karg Island? I just don't. I mean, they've kind of all he's done is he keeps choking the strait. I just don't. They said that the key to Iran is that Karg Island. That's where their stuff comes out. I know he's trying to. They said if they can't, they don't have any more place to put any more oil.
They
They keep the
they said they got 3 weeks before
yeah,
they're full.
they're full. And then if they
Three
have to
weeks
cap
before they're
it, they
full.
said they will they I don't understand enough about it, but they say if they cap it or stop it, that they'll never be able to restart it. I don't know why. I don't know what the situation is, but
I,
that's
s- I saw gas today at a gas station at $4.81 a gallon.
hmm
Yeah.
yeah, it's going to be kind of tough. It's still not as high as what Biden had it.
No,
Biden had over
Biden
five.
had, yeah, it was over 5 with Biden. Yeah. So we had to get into a war for all this to happen
Yeah.
with Trump. You
Yep.
know,
But it says here, this is a Fox News article. Trump squeezes Iran with maximum pressure. Why hasn't it forced a breakthrough? Because they're crazy.
yeah,
They're nuts.
Iran is nuts. They don't, and they have no qualms if they can hang 16-year-old kids. Um,
yeah,
and if they can do, they have no qualms about making, they mow down 30, 40,000 of their people. They have no qualms.
Well, it's one thing to be crazy. It's another thing to be stupid
Mhm.
and crazy.
Yeah.
Because that's
Well,
what Hitler was.
they are over. I mean, they're demonically controlled.
Yeah.
They're
Yep.
just demons coming through these guys, and they don't want any giving up of any of their power
Right.
in all of this situation. They're drunk on their power, and they have this messianic. Uh, their thing is called the Mahdi. And
Mhm.
so, and they have this messianic complex, and they're going to be the ones to bring the Messiah back. And everybody's going to be, they're the greatest. They're better than any other Muslims. They're better than the world. This is what they're drunk on. It's demonic. After 2 months of conflict, neither a deadly bombing campaign nor a blockade on Iranian exports has forced Tehran to make concessions the Trump administration is seeking. The other interesting thing about Iran, they have knocked out everybody that was in leadership.
Yeah.
I mean, the top people gone.
Remember when we were
Then-
joking, folks, about 10-year-olds being in leadership?
I mean, they
Yeah.
whacked them down, whacked them down. What has it done? They're still in power.
Yeah.
They have the same kind of weaving control like the Democrats have here.
Right.
It doesn't matter. They took a vote today. I can't remember what the thing they were voting on today. It has to do with funding certain things. And every Democrat, I'm assuming Fetterman, no, but like 186 Democrats voted against it.
Right.
And so they stick together like that. And that's what's going on in Iran. It doesn't matter who gets taken out. The same level of crazy is all the way down.
Right.
There's it's not like you got the little lesser guys saying, well, hey, let's get along with Trump. Maybe I'll survive. No. All the same crazed mindset that holds them together. And
Yeah.
they're willing to kill and they're willing to lob bombs. They haven't stopped it.
Right.
This happens in Lebanon. How much has Israel bombed of Lebanon?
Right.
And they're still in there, still trying to bomb back at Israel.
Well, this all happened when Trump pulled out of Iran last June. They built everything up again. They not only built themselves up, they built their proxies up too. And I said at the time, I thought that was a big mistake, him pulling out without decimating Iran. And here we are.
And like I said, these guys that are in control, it doesn't matter. You take out one layer, next layer comes up, same crazy. Take out that layer, next layer comes up, same crazy, same glued, same held together,
Right.
same. They're not. There's nothing busting apart. There,
Right.
it's nothing. Nope, we're gonna hold together because this is our. It's there. Like I said, they do not have separation of mosque and state.
Right.
This is their conquest, their religion. Everything's tied together and it goes all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway, it says
Do we want that here in America?
no. We've got some
We're
of it,
supposed
like
to
I
get
said,
rid-
in the Democrat Party.
their theology is get rid of the infidels,
Yeah.
and that includes Jews and Christians.
Well,
Mhm.
that includes anybody who doesn't agree with them
Yeah.
that
Right.
are a Muslim.
Right.
I mean, that's how bad it is.
yeah, that's how bad
I
it
mean,
is.
I was hearkening back. There's a basketball player. His name's Hakeem Olajuwon, and he came over from Africa as a Muslim, and he played in the '80s. And there was a big, during the Iranian crisis where they were taking hostages and stuff. He was talking about, hey, he says you shouldn't worry about Muslims in this country. The Quran tells us to conform to the laws of the country we move to.
Right.
That was in the '80s.
Right.
You know how times have changed.
Right.
Well, he lied.
You
Yeah.
know.
He
He lied.
flat out lied.
Well, I think he
He
wasn't a good
lied.
Muslim.
Yeah,
I don't think
he-
he was a
I-
good Muslim.
he
don't
was
know the
he
Quran.
was
Yeah,
he was
he didn't
doing
know the Quran.
takia. He did, maybe he didn't, but he was doing that takia bit. Oh, we're just so good and wonderful.
Right.
We're grand citizens. We come in and yeah, it's a lie.
Mhm.
He could lie easily.
Oh,
I
sure.
don't trust anybody anymore. Oh, they seem like a good Muslim. I don't trust them at all
Mm-hmm.
because they do not have the guidance of the Lord.
Right.
They're following a moon
False
god.
God, a moon god. That's right.
And so I don't trust anything about them. There's nothing that I can trust because they don't have the God of the Bible, the living God in them.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't care what he said.
Well, I found it funny because there was another basketball player. He played at Louisiana State. His name was Chris Jackson, who changed his name to Mahmoud Raouf was his last name. And he got so into Islam, he moved to Turkey. And this was at the same time Olajuwon was making his comments. And that's where I thought there might be something to it. It's like, well, if he's supposed to conform to the laws of his country, he decided to move to Turkey because it ain't for him,
Yeah. Well,
you know?
again, yeah. Oh, well, it says after 2 months of conflict, neither a deadly bombing campaign or no. Okay, I went through all that. The campaign has intensified in recent weeks, targeting Iran's oil exports and financial networks, while a naval blockade has disrupted shipments to the Strait of Hormuz, a critical artery for global energy flows. U.S. officials argue the combination of military pressure and economic isolation is intended to weaken Iran's capabilities and force it back to the negotiating table on more favorable terms. I don't know how you're going to negotiate with crazy. But while the U.S. has killed Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, and dozens of top military and political figures, the regime itself remains intact. Again, they're crazy. His son, Mojtaba Khomeini, was selected to succeed him. The leadership remains firmly hardline. This is the Fox News article.
Mm-hmm.
Aaron David Miller, former State Department Middle East negotiator and fellow at the Carnegie Endowment, said the administration may have misjudged the type of negotiating partner it would face. Trump was looking for an Iranian Delcy Rodriguez. He told Fox News Digital, more likely he's going to end up with an Iranian Kim Jong Un. It says here he expressed doubt that any decisive victory was possible while the current Iranian regime remains in power. And we do not have the capacity to remove the regime. Now, that's the problem here.
Mm-hmm.
Not unless you put boots on the ground, right? The standoff increasingly has become a test of whether U.S. pressure can be converted into political concessions or whether it is instead being diluted through workarounds, institutional resilience, and competing constraints. So far, analysts say Iran has proven more capable of absorbing and rerouting pressure than Washington has been able to translate it into durable gains. On Monday, Iran floated a proposal to reopen the Strait of Hormuz in exchange for relief from the blockade while deferring negotiations on more contentious issues. That's what they do.
Yeah.
But analysts caution with such proposals do not address the core dispute and may not even mean the same thing to both sides. What the Iranians mean by opening the straits and what Trump means may be two different sorts of things, Miller
Yeah.
said.
We'll open the strait for a couple weeks.
Yeah. At the center of the standoff is Iran's nuclear program, where the gap between the two sides remains wide. The Trump administration has pushed for Iran to eliminate its uranium enrichment capability entirely, while Iran insists that enrichment is a sovereign right and non negotiable. That leaves little room for compromise. The divide continues to block a broader agreement, even as both sides explore more limited steps to reduce immediate tensions. It's almost unimaginable that this administration and the Iranian leadership are willing to make the kinds of concessions that would allow this administration to walk away with a win. Iranians are willing to give concessions, but Trump is looking for capitulation, said Trisha Parsi, executive vice president of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft think tank. And you can't get a country to capitulate unless you have defeated them. And that's the key. Instead of folding under pressure, Iran largely has responded by adapting. Despite the blockade, Iran has continued to move at least some oil through workaround methods, including sanctioned vessels, smaller ports, and alternative routing strategies, even as overall exports have come under strain. Those efforts have expanded in recent weeks. Reports indicate Iran is exploring overland shipments, including potential rail exports to China. while vessels have increasingly rerouted through Iranian territorial waters or controlled shipping corridors to bypass restrictions. See, they're making it work.
Mm-hmm.
The United States successfully closes off one avenue for them, and slowly but surely they are finding workarounds. The financial impact of the campaign has been significant, even if uneven. Estimates vary, but some analysts put Iran's potential losses from the blockade at roughly $400 million per day, largely driven by disrupted oil exports and reduced access to hard currency. At the same time, Iran has not been fully cut off. The country has continued to generate billions in oil revenues in recent months. Billions with a B, underscoring both the scale of the pressure and its limits. While a sustained drop in oil revenue would strain the government's official budget and force cuts to public spending, the country's most powerful institution, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, operates through its own economic networks, including smuggling routes and cross border trade. That allows key parts of the regime to continue functioning even under heavy sanctions, meaning economic pain often falls unevenly, hitting civilians before it weakens the state's coercive apparatus. Even attempts to directly destabilize Iran's leadership have not fundamentally altered that dynamic. U.S. and Israeli operations earlier in the conflict killed Khamenei along with dozens of senior military and political figures. Yet the regime remained intact, with power consolidating among remaining political and security elites aligned with hardline positions. How long Iran can sustain that posture remains uncertain, Miller said. A prolonged blockade could eventually force a breaking point, but only if Washington is willing to maintain it. If the administration is preparing for 6 months to keep this blockade, I think they could probably break the Iranian economy. But he cautioned that such timelines are difficult to predict and that even U.S. intelligence lacks a clear picture of when economic pressure might translate into political concessions. That uncertainty raises a broader question about the sustainability of the strategy. While Iran's leadership may be willing to absorb significant economic pain, the U.S. faces its own constraints, including potential strain on military resources and growing risks to global energy markets. There are no midterms, there are no primaries, there are no sell by dates for Iran, Miller said, and Trump has a sell by date. The White House did not respond to a request for comment. For now, both sides appear to be waiting for the other to lose the political will to sustain the standoff, with global energy markets caught in the middle. So that's where we're standing.
You remember I said a couple, 2, 3 weeks ago when I was here that whatever it is that we're trying to do with Iran, it's not going to work
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
because
They're still allowed economically
they're
to,
still
to,
allowed.
to yeah, and so
Yeah,
we got to do to Iran what the North did to the South in the Civil War. You got to keep them from trading. You got to choke their resources
right,
and starve them.
right.
And
You know,
what's that got to do? That means we got to go to war with China.
probably. So
And I don't think that's going to happen.
right.
So,
Well, just to show you how things have changed, I mentioned a while ago the Chris Jackson, who was a basketball player. He played for the Denver Nuggets in the NBA. Changed his name to Mahmoud Abdul Rauf. Okay, in 1995 and 96, he says that he was blackballed from the NBA. Why? During the 95-96 season, Mahmoud Abdul Rauf, formerly Chris Jackson, sat down during the national anthem, stating that the standing conflicted with his Muslim faith. He outspokenly criticized American history, citing slavery and the nation's role in foreign conflicts as reasons he could not honor the flag. Following his refusal, the NBA quickly suspended him in March of 1996, and his actions led to severe criticism, including radio host, talk show host, mockery, hate mail, and the burning down of his home. So I'm saying, look at how times have changed.
he'd be celebrated today.
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
just like the guy that took the knee, he'd be celebrated.
So, after he later compromised by standing while praying with his hands over his face, the protest marked the end of his prominent NBA career, with critics and observers believing he was blacklisted for his outspokenness before such protests were more common.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, but like I said, nowadays he'd be celebrated. Well, I have one article here. Let's see how much we can get through it, and then I had a couple of the archaeology type things. I had one more thing I want to read out of his book, but we're getting down to close to the 9 o'clock hour. Got a few things.
Central Standard Time.
Yeah. So I know we got started a little late, but hey, we're getting close. This is an article that came from Israel 365 News. It's titled Rabbi says Bible verse number 5787 is a message from God. 2027 is the messianic deadline. Now these are not believers in Yeshua. This is totally a Jewish site, okay? They do not believe that Yeshua is Messiah. But I think it's interesting to find out what their rabbis and scholars believe. Rabbi Isser Weisberg told Tamar Yonan that an ancient Jewish prophecy explains today's headlines, from the Iran nuclear standoff to Trump's Gaza ambitions. In a wide ranging interview on the Tamar Yonan show, Rabbi Isser Weisberg connected the dots between a 2,500-year-old version of a paralyzed bear, the Dome of the Rock, October 7th, and Donald Trump's desire to build a resort in Gaza. How he does it with a calm, scholarly precision that is either deeply compelling or deeply unsettling, depending on where you stand. Rabbi Weisberg, a longtime communal rabbi and educator with expertise in Jewish eschatology, which is the theology of the end times, has spent more than 35 years studying the prophecies scattered across the Hebrew Bible, the Talmud, the Zohar, and later Kabbalistic sources. He is also, by his own admission, very aware of how easily this field can go wrong. A lot of people, they see a nice prophecy or they hear something and right away they're putting it on YouTube, he says early in the interview. A lot of times it's taken out of context. You really have to spend a lot of time. It's very, very complicated. With that caveat firmly on the table, he proceeds to lay out one of the most sweeping prophetic interpretations of current events you are likely to hear: the Lubavitcher Rebbe's 1991 instruction, as the title here. The rabbi begins with a question that religious Jews familiar with Jewish law might immediately raise. Aren't you supposed to avoid trying to calculate when the Messiah is coming? He quotes the Rambam, Maimonides, and the Rama, two foundational medieval authorities, both of whom discourage the practice on the grounds that it wastes time better spent on Torah study and ethical living, and because, frankly, no one has ever successfully figured it out. The Rambam says, "You're wasting your time because you're not going to figure it out," Weisberg explains. He says everybody tried to figure it out. Even the sages of the Talmud tried to figure it out. But he points to a pivotal moment. In 1991, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendelssohn Schneerson, the towering leader of the Chabad Lubavitch movement, who passed away in 1994, publicly called on his followers to study all the prophetic sources related to the redemption. This, Weisberg argues, was a signal that the earlier restriction no longer applied. End of times events were finally unfolding in real time, and people needed to understand what they were witnessing. The Rambam's restriction doesn't apply anymore, Weisberg said. It only applies in earlier times before it's unfolding. As it's unfolding, to the contrary, we're supposed to learn all these sources to understand what we're seeing. Of course, those of us who believe in Yeshua
Know what we're seeing.
we've been looking for it for 2,000 years, right? The 1991 timing was the year that saw the collapse of the Soviet Union and the beginning of a massive wave of Jewish immigration to Israel, ultimately more than 1 million people, many of them from the former Soviet republics. The Rebbe Weisberg recalls declared this a fulfillment a biblical prophecy about the ingathering of the exiles. Now, uh, this is the gentleman that he was also the one, and I was telling before the show to Richard that this was the one I believe that he lived to be 108 years old, and he said he was going to write down the name of the Messiah, and that after he died, that they could open it up and read it. I think he had to wait a year or something like that. And when they opened up the paper and saw what he had written, he wrote a like what seemed to be a verse or like a words, like a saying. But then they figured it out eventually. It was like an acrostic. You took the first letter of each word, and the first letter of each word spelled out Yeshua. And they immediately pulled it down, and they immediately said he was crazy.
Well,
But
that's typical.
and then I had heard this is where there was I can't remember his name right off the top of my head, but he was on I believe he was on one time on Jim Baker's program where he said he's a rabbi in Israel who believes in Yeshua, and he said these people that are they're trying to get people to come back to the Jewish faith, and so they go out and they're evangelizing and witnessing, trying to get you to become back to the Judaism. And so he said, I was sitting at a stoplight, and of course they have their windows open, and one of these guys shoved a pamphlet in my window, and he goes, I don't want that stuff. I don't believe in that. I don't want that. And he said, I'm a believer in Yeshua, and he said, and the guy who handed him the leaflet looked around, and he said, we are too.
Wow.
And he's like, what? And he said, so anyway, to make the longer story shorter, he got, I think, in touch with them and found out that this gentleman had a inner circle of people that he taught, and that he was teaching them about Yeshua.
Mm-hmm.
They were not the greater of his students. They were just an inner group that he trusted that he would teach. And so, that is an end time sign to me that some of the Jewish people in these movements are beginning to recognize Yeshua as Messiah. That's an end time sign. Anyway, it says here, um, the Reb Weisberg recalls declaring that the fulfillment of the prophecy about the ingathering of the exiles, is Gog the USA. At the heart of Jewish end time prophecies is the war of Gog and Magog. That's what we're seeing in the
Right.
Bible codes. The cataclysmic final conflict described in the biblical book of Ezekiel and Zechariah, in which a great northern power leads a coalition of nations against Israel before the Messianic era begins. For centuries, scholars have debated who Gog and the land of Magog represents. Weisberg's answer, developed over decades of research, is unambiguous. He says Magog is the United States of America. His primary source is the Arizal, Rabbi Isaac Luria, the 16th century Kabbalist regarded by virtually all streams of traditional Judaism as an unparalleled mystical authority. The Arizal, Weisberg explains, wrote that the Hebrew word Gog has a numerical value of 70, and that Gog represents whichever nation holds the 70 nations of the world, i.e., the global superpower at the time of the redemption. After 1991, America is the undisputable superpower, Weisberg said, so then it's for sure Magog. You only have to identify who Gog is. He also floats a linguistic observation. The first president of the United States was named George, and the name George shares 3 of the 4 Hebrew letters of Gog. Whether this is evidence or coincidence, he acknowledges, is debatable. But he finds it suggestive that the tradition of naming something after its founding figure is well attested in the Bible itself. The geographical question of how Magog is described as being from the distant north of Israel, while America is on the other side of the globe, he answers with a creative, if controversial, argument. Israel is not at the equator. But if you reposition the globe so that Israel sits at the belly button of the world, as described in Ezekiel, then the north encompasses Alaska, which became an American state in 1959, placing America genuinely north of Israel on a reoriented map. He acknowledges this is a stretch, but presses on.
It's a stretch.
This identification leads to a sweeping reinterpretation of U.S. Israel relations across the past several decades. Far from being Israel's loyal protector, Weisberg argues America has played the role of Gog not through open military aggression, but through relentless diplomatic and political pressure designed to prevent Israel from establishing full sovereignty and, crucially, from rebuilding the temple in Jerusalem. He traces this pattern from the very beginning. America was not the first one to recognize Israel. Truman did not recognize it for another year. Russia was the first to do it. During Israel's War of Independence in 1948, just 3 years after the Holocaust, America said, "We're not sending you one bullet." Meanwhile, the British were actively arming Arab armies, including the Jordanians. The pattern continued through every subsequent administration. After the Sinai Campaign of 1956, American pressure forced Israel to withdraw from the Sinai Peninsula, a withdrawal Weisberg blames counterfactually but pointedly for making the 1967 Six Day War and the 1973 Yom Kippur War inevitable. He even includes Ronald Reagan in this critique. He armed Iran to the teeth. He sold very sophisticated AWACS to Saudi Arabia, and Israel protested, and he said, "Jump in the lake." Even in Trump's first term, he argues that this pattern held. When Prime Minister Netanyahu was finally ready to formally annex parts of Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, territory that Weisberg and many on the Israeli right regard as historically and biblically Israelite, Trump said no. The reason it would jeopardize the Abraham Accords, the normalization agreements Trump was brokering between Israel and several Gulf Arab states. Trump stopped the Jews from merely taking control of their own land, Weisberg says. But he is careful to say that this was not malice. It was, in prophetic terms, America fulfilling its role as Gog, pressuring Israel, keeping it in a state of dependence, preventing it from fully actualizing its biblical destiny. Interesting to see how they're seeing this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Weisberg believes Trump's second term, which began in January 2025, represents the end of this era. The dynamic has finally changed. He uses the biblical story of Jacob and Esau to explain it. In Genesis, Jacob, the ancestor of the Jewish people, and Esau, whose descendants in Jewish tradition spiritually became Rome and eventually Western civilization, are rivals but brothers. After years of estrangement, Esau comes to meet Jacob with a large army, and Jacob fears for his life, sends lavish gifts, and bows before his older brother. Instead of attacking, Esau embraces him and offers his protection. This is the new era, the new Esau, Weisberg says, using the Hebrew pronunciation. Not Esau, but Esau. Trump has now broken that pattern. Gog from the land of Magog is gone, is dead, and is finished. Interesting, huh? Trump is the best version we're going to have of Esau before Mashiach comes, Weisberg says. He's not the Gog version of Esau that's fighting Jews in any way, not even politically. Intention The tension in Trump's current behavior, simultaneously championing Israel and restraining it, threatening Iran and negotiating with it, Weisberg attributes to the natural complexity of this transitional moment and to the ongoing dispute in heaven between the souls of great sages who disagree about how the final confrontation should unfold. Weird philosophies here, huh?
Yes.
If America is Magog, then Iran, ancient Persia, plays the role of the second great power in the final drama. And here the prophetic framework becomes in some ways the four world empires that would subjugate the Jewish people: Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. The Talmud further states that at the end of days, only two of these empires will remain: the Roman Western civilization led by America and the Persian Iran, and there will be a massive confrontation between them. Weisberg adds a mystical dimension from Daniel chapter 10. The angel Gabriel tells the prophet that he and the archangel Michael have been physically restraining the spiritual force of Persia, holding it back from unleashing its rage against the Jewish people for centuries. This restraint, he argues, is why the historical Persian Empire was so remarkably benevolent toward the Jews. Cyrus allowed the Jews to return from Babylonian exile. Darius commanded that anyone who interfered with the rebuilding of the temple would be hanged. The Talmud itself was compiled within the borders of the Persian Empire. But that supernatural restraint, he says, has now been lifted. The Islamic Revolution of 1979, which transformed Iran from a secular monarchy friendly to Israel into a theocratic regime singularly obsessed with Israel's destruction, represents the moment the bear was finally chained. For 2,500 years, this bear has been shackled and it's full with rage. He said, for 2,500 years, I have a mission to devour Jews. This is my godly mission, and these angels are not letting me do it. October 7th, in this framework, was Iran finally fulfilling its ancient prophetic mission. Its proxies, Hamas, unleashing violence on the scale that the angels could no longer prevent. And yet, even October 7th, as horrific as it was a toned down version of what the prophecies originally described. The verse in Daniel chapter 12, Weisberg explains, says that when Iran finally attacks, it will be the worst time of suffering for the Jewish people since the nation was formed at Sinai. Worse than the Holocaust, worse than the destruction of the first and second temples. October 7th was horrible beyond imagination, but it did not eclipse the Holocaust, he said. The fact that it didn't, he argues, is the evidence of the power of centuries of prayer by righteous Jews that the decree be softened. Zechariah 14, chapter 14, he notes, describes enemies conquering half of Jerusalem and taking its inhabitants captive, which would mean which would mean hundreds of thousands of hostages. October 7th produced 251. The gap between the prophecy and the event, he suggests, is the measure of how much the prayers of the righteous accomplished. Perhaps the most arresting claim in the interview is Weisberg's assertion that he has been making for 6 years, that the Jewish year 5787, corresponding roughly to 2026 2027, represents a prophetic deadline for the onset of the Messianic era. He derives this from the final verses of the book of Daniel, which state, luckily, the person who waits and reaches 1,335 days. The question is when to start counting those 1,335 years, Weisberg's answer, from the completion of the Dome of the Rock, the Islamic shrine built on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. The dome's interior inscription gives its completion date as the Arabic year 72, which spans April 691 to April 692 Common Era. Adding 1,335 years to 692 yields the year 2027. He adds a remarkable numerical observation. If you count all the verses in the Bible, verse number 5,787 corresponds to the Jewish year 5787 or 2027, falls in Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 34, in the portion called the Ha'azinu. That verse reads in his translation, the secret of the end is with me. God and I don't tell anybody else. God hid the secret in plain sight, Weisberg says with evident wonder, because he's telling you a secret. And if you count the verses, the secret is revealed. But nobody counted it until recently. He is quick to add layers of uncertainty. Different Jewish traditions divide the Bible verses differently, Sephardic versus Ashkenazic customs. So the verse count may not land precisely on 5787. The dome may have been completed in 691 rather than 692, which would make the deadline this year. And even if 2027 is the deadline, it is a deadline. The Messiah could come earlier and indeed may already be overdue. Jewish eschatology includes a fascinating and often overlooked figure, the Mishach ben Yosef, a first Messiah who precedes the final Davidic Messiah. He is described as a righteous leader who prepares the world for Messiah's coming, but who is killed in the wars of Gog and Magog. Those centuries of prayer, Weisberg says, have sought to avert or soften that fate. Of course, we know who it is because of the discussion between Yeshua and John the Baptist, right? Yochanan the Immerser. When asked directly who this figure is, Weisberg answers without hesitation, for the sure it's the Lubavitch Rebbe, not a question about it. His reasoning, the Lubavitcher Rebbe explicitly declared his mission to be preparing the world for the Messiah's coming and spent 4 decades doing exactly that, building a global network of Chabad centers and bringing hundreds of thousands of Jews back to religious practice. The Midrash says that the Mashiach ben Yosef will reign for 40 years. The Rebbe led his movement from 1951 until his stroke in 1992, precisely 40 years. And the tradition notes that some followers of the Mashiach ben Yosef will mistakenly believe he is the final Messiah. This is a description that fits the messianic beliefs of some within the Chabad community. everything it says about Mashiach ben Yosef, the Rebbe, fulfilled all the prophecy, he says. That era is behind us. We're on the final phase. Now I'm reading all this. Sounds kind of wacky here, but even in this, they're saying we're in the final days. We
Right.
all are directed on this path that we know. And it says, for those hoping for a decisive Israeli military victory in Gaza or Lebanon, Weisberg offers cold comfort, but frames it prophetic rather than in strategic terms. I am 1,000% convinced we're finished with the wars of Gog and Magog, he says. Oh, he's wrong.
Yeah.
But he argues that the wars in Gaza and Lebanon are not those final wars, though they are something smaller and their resolution will remain incomplete. Isaiah chapter 11, he notes, describes the Mashiach blowing away the Philistines, whom he identifies with modern Palestinians, with barely any effort, suggesting the defeat of Hamas is specifically a post-messianic event, not something that will happen before. Similarly, Zechariah chapter 10 says Israel will inherit Lebanon, but only after the Messiah comes. It's not in the books, he says simply, of a complete military victory in these theaters, before the Messianic era. The real war, the one that is in the books, is between America and Iran. That confrontation is happening now, and Weisberg believes it will determine the shape of everything that follows. He might be right on that. Because it might be the setup, I believe, for the real Ezekiel 38-39 war, right?
Mm-hmm.
Weisberg outlines three components of the Messianic era that he believes are imminent in some form: the appearance of Messiah himself, the ingathering of all Jews to Israel, and the rebuilding of the temple, or at minimum, the reinstatement of sacrifices on the Temple Mount altar. Interesting, huh?
Yeah, that's interesting.
He is careful to say he does not know which will come first or in what form. See, they keep, dancing around about the red cows, right? The
Right.
red heifers. A Temple Mount altar. He even raises the possibility that a sufficiently bold Israeli prime minister could simply authorize the construction of an altar on the Temple Mount in an area where no existing Islamic structure stands and begin sacrificial worship. This alone, he suggests, would constitute a messianic beginning, regardless of whether a recognized Messiah has appeared. There's an interesting thought. You hung with me through this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if we're praying so long that we should be able to bring the sacrifices. If we actually do that, that's big, he says. His final message is urgent but not panicked. He warns that after the Messiah comes, people will regret not having done more charity, more kindness, more study during the window when such actions carried maximum spiritual weight. He's definitely coming today, tomorrow. He's definitely coming, Weisberg says. And we're going to say, I knew Mashiach was coming. Why didn't I take that opportunity to do more?
He states in there that the Talmud was developed in Persia.
Uh-huh.
Well, that's the Babylonian Talmud.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the Palestinian Talmud, which was developed in Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
So there's two Talmuds.
Oh yeah.
Now, the more authoritative one is the Babylonian
Babylonian
Talmud.
Talmud, yes. Yeah.
Definitely.
So interesting to see what's being thought about,
Yeah.
And like I said, I find it, everybody's looking and everybody's seeing and sensing this end of the age. Now we know that the question was raised by Yochanan the Immerser. He said, two, he sent two of his, because he was in prison. He sent two of his followers to Jesus to ask, "Are you the one, or should we look for another?" And everybody thinks that he was John the Baptist was, having lack of faith, when it wasn't that. He was asking him this question. Basically, are you Messiah ben Yosef, the suffering servant to die, or are you Messiah ben David, the conqueror? Right? That's what he was asking. He was fully convinced that Yeshua was the Messiah. And what Yeshua answered back was, tell them what you've seen. And basically, the characteristics he was describing of what were of both. In other words, he was revealing at that time he said, and that basically you're seeing the blind, seeing, the deaf hearing, the dead raised.
Hmm.
Okay, he was also Messiah ben David as well as Messiah ben Yosef. And then he said, talked about, that, those who are not offended, that would be, so he was basically saying back to him, I am the Messiah. It was a dialogue going on
Right.
between this.
Hmm.
So now, that, and we recognize that he is, of course, in his first coming came as the Messiah ben Joseph, the one who laid down his life.
I don't
And
understand why the rabbis never figured that out, that that was a possibility, because there were resurrections in the Old Testament.
mhm.
Why didn't they say,
They
well,
did
this?
not believe that the
Yeah,
Messiah was to be God.
yeah,
Yeshua was not calling himself the Son of God. Yeshua was calling himself God.
right,
And they could not, their idea of Messiah is he is a man, okay?
Hmm.
That there is only one God, and they
Hmm.
could not reconcile the God man.
right,
Hmm.
That's what they couldn't reconcile.
right.
Okay. So that's where the problem was. And it's a so that's what so they don't recognize uh, that. And when Yeshua was calling himself God, they
Hmm.
rejected him.
Right.
And that's what got him crucified. you know.
Yeah.
So anyway, we are down to a couple of these. Let's see, what time is it? Yes, we are fully at the end here. So let me just read a couple of these really quickly that also came from Israel 365 News. The Negev channels are flowing. Record desert floods echo King David's vision. The hills of North Arad turning white Monday under a blanket of hail. Roads across the Negev and the Arava were shut down. The Nahal Tit Elim, the ancient desert stream that drains into the Dead Sea near Masada, recorded the strongest flow since measurements began. The Israel Meteorological Society confirmed that approximately 30 milliliters of rain fell in the Nahal Tzialim drainage basin in the short period, triggering a record breaking flash flood. Dr. Amir Gavadi, director of the Meteorological Service, said that the recent years have seen a marked increase in extreme weather events driven by a collision of warm and cold air systems, producing flash floods and unusual hailstorms. Heavy hail was documented across the Kanaim Valley on the edge of the Judean desert, and strong flow also recorded at the Qumran waterfall. The Southern District Police deployed extensively and entered a state of special preparedness. By late afternoon Monday, several major roads were closed to traffic. Highway 204 was shut at kilometer 148 in both directions. Highway 90 was blocked from the Tzafit junction to the Arava junction. Travelers heading to or from Eilat were directed to use Highway 40 instead. Police urged drivers to avoid non essential travel to affected areas to follow officers' instructions on the ground. The storms followed a sharp drop in temperatures, leaving them slightly below the seasonal average. The Meteorological Service warned of continued flash flooding risks in streams near the Dead Sea, the Negev, and the Arava overnight. Tuesday is expected to be partly cloudy with possible light local rain in the morning, with the temperatures returning to seasonable norms by Wednesday and Thursday. The recent weather echoes the words of King David. When the Lord restores the captivity of Zion, we're like dreamers. Restore our fortunes, O Lord, like streams in the Negev. Psalm 126, 1 and 4. The Hebrew phrase Afika Negev, channels of the Negev, refers precisely to these dry desert riverbeds that remain empty for years and then, without warning, are transformed by rushing water. The sages explained that this image was chosen deliberately. Redemption, like a desert flood, does not require permission from those who deny it, nor does it unfold according to human effort. It arrives with force, speed, and irreversible change. The Bible repeatedly treats the land of Israel as a living participant in Jewish history. Rain falls when Israel is restored to its land and is withheld when it is driven out. Desert streams flowing again are not symbols invented by modern readers. They are the Bible's own chosen language for national return and divine intervention. Isaiah states it plainly, I will open rivers on barren heights and springs in the midst of valleys. I will make the wilderness a pool of water and the dry land springs of water, from Isaiah 41:18. It says the Bible presents hail not as a meteorological surprise, but as something fully under divine control. In Job, God confronts humanity's human certainty about the natural world. Have you entered the storehouses of snow, or have you seen the storehouses of hail? Job 38:22. Hail is described not as an accident of nature, but as something stored and released by God at his discretion. The verse emphasizes authority, not wonder. The sages taught that weather is not background noise to history. It is one of the instruments through which God governs the world. When hail blankets a desert known for relentless heat and drought, it exposes how fragile human expectations are. The landscape people assume will always remain the same can be overturned overnight. Nahal Tze'elim has been measured for years. Monday, it broke every record in its history. The hills near Arad, one of the most arid places in the land, went white with hail. These are not coincidences to be explained away with climate charts. The Afike Negev are flowing and the Jewish people are home.
That's 11 inches of rain,
Yeah.
inches of hail.
Yeah. And it says temple gold in a Jerusalem church basement. The explosive story this church doesn't want you to ask. Somewhere beneath a 12th century Crusader church in the heart of Jerusalem, a church flying the French flag and administered by the French consulate, a professor of numismatics once stood in a dark cellar staring at golden vessels he immediately recognized as the sacred utensils of the Holy Temple. He pinched himself. He rubbed his eyes. Then a monk's thunderous voice shattered the silence. It is forbidden for you to be here. The professor was escorted out. The subject was never officially discussed again. The story is documented in Rabbi Harry Moscoff's new book, The Vatican and Me, and it is one of the most arresting accounts to emerge from the long and murky history of the temple's vessel's whereabouts. Moskoff, a Remy Award winning investigative archaeologist, journalist, and director of the Museum Heritage Project at the Vatican, has spent over 25 years tracking credible eyewitness accounts of people who claim to have seen temple treasures in Rome, in Jerusalem, and in places no one is supposed to talk about. After Israel's miraculous victory returned the old city of Jerusalem to Jewish hands, a professor named Dr. Yaakov, then chair of the archaeology department and a numismatics professor at the Israel Museum, was invited to St. Anne's Church in eastern Jerusalem to assess a large collection of Byzantine coins and icons. St. Anne's Church is a French Catholic church and part of the French national domain in the Holy Land, located in the Muslim quarter of the old city of Jerusalem near the Lion's Gate. The monks had been corresponding with Dr. Yaakov for months about the collection, and the conclusion of the 6 Day War finally provided him with the opportunity to examine it in person. He was welcomed warmly. Church officials led him to the room containing the coins, told him he would have approximately 3 hours to complete his work, and locked the door behind him, saying it was to keep out tourists. He sat down, examined the collection thoroughly, and finished ahead of schedule. He knocked on the locked door, no answer. He knocked again, nothing. With time to spare and no cell phone, this was the late 1960s, Dr. Yalkov began walking the perimeter of the room looking for another exit. He found one, a hidden side door. He pulled the handle. It opened onto a dark descending staircase. At the bottom, he found himself in a large, dark cellar. As his eyes adjusted, his gaze fell on a table in the center of the room. On it were golden utensils, ash collecting pans, incense shovels, and large cups used to throw sacrificial blood onto the altar. He drew closer. Some of the vessels bore Hebrew inscriptions. The temple vessels are in Jerusalem, he whispered to himself. Seconds later, a door burst open. A monk's voice boomed off the cellar walls. It is forbidden for you to be here. Dr. Yolkov was escorted out of the compound, firmly but politely, and the matter was closed, at least from the church's side. What makes this account more than and unverifiable story is what came next. Sometime after the visit, the coin collection at St. Anne's was stolen. The police and the insurance company both needed Dr. Yelkoff, the last professional to have seen and assessed the full collection, to file a report on its value. He agreed on one condition: he would cooperate with the insurance investigation only if the church allowed him back into that cellar. The monk's response was categorical. There was nothing down there to see. The professor's response was equally blunt. They were, he said, the best bluffers around. No deal was made. The professor never went back down, and the church has never wavered from its position. What is that cellar hiding? The question cuts right to the heart of one of history's longest running mysteries. Where are the Kelim or the of the Beit Hamikdash? The menorah, the shalcone table, the mizrach basin for blood, and the machta incense shovel are not merely historical artifacts. They are sacred objects fashioned for divine service, described in exacting detail in the Torah itself. And you shall make its pans to receive its ashes, and its shovels, and its basins, and its forks, and its fire pans, and all its utensils you shall make of copper. Exodus 27:3. The sages have long taught that the most sacred of these vessels were hidden before the destruction of the temple. Hidden, not lost. The Talmud, Tractate Yoma 54a, records that certain holy objects were genuzim, concealed deliberately. The Masachet Kelim, a medieval Hebrew text, goes further, cataloging hidden treasures buried throughout the land of Israel, awaiting the time of redemption. That sense of divine timing runs through every layer of this story. A second, no less gripping account, set at the turn of the 20th century, describes this aspect of divine timing. A Jewish farmer plowing a field near Jerusalem fell into a pit that suddenly opened beneath his feet. When his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he saw golden vessels and knew exactly what they were. He climbed out, filled the pit with earth, drew a map, and traveled to New York to see Rabbi Yosef Herman. Rabbi Herman, convinced of the account's credibility, sent his son Reb Nochum Dovid with the map and a sealed letter to the greatest Torah authority of the generation, Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kagan, known as the Chofetz Chaim, who lived in Radin, Poland. The Chofetz Chaim listened carefully uh, very intently, and then took some Sofarim books from his bookcase and became deeply engrossed in them. After a while, he said that according to the description of the Discovery site, these golden vessels could very well be the holy vessels from the Beit Hamikdash. Then he lit a match and burned the map to ashes. His only comment: it's not yet the time. Rabbi Herman passed on the story in detail to two people, his son and Rabbi Chaim Pinkus Scheinberg. The farmer lived out the rest of his days without ever speaking of what he had seen. The Chofetz Chaim had, with his formidable spiritual authority, seen to that. Back to St. Anne's. The political dimension of this story cannot be ignored. The compound containing the pools of Bethsaida and St. Anne's Church is administered by the White Fathers, but the property's ultimate authority is diplomatic. France does not recognize Israeli sovereignty over East Jerusalem, where St. Anne sits. During French President Jacques Chirac's 1996 visit to Jerusalem, he refused to enter the church until the Israeli soldiers who had accompanied him left, though Arab soldiers were apparently welcome to remain. Moskov had attempted repeatedly to get into the cellar. He attended as a tourist. He scheduled appointments with the French consulate general, arriving with a press pass and a small delegation. Every time the relevant diplomat had just stepped out, was on holiday, or would be in touch soon. The priests on the site are equally airtight. Ask a simple question such as, Father, where does this staircase lead? And the answer will be either a lecture on the church's Crusader architecture or an abrupt turn and exit every time. The artifacts that Moskov has been tracking in his Vatican work include ancient machta, incense shovels, and the chazotzrot, silver trumpets, as well as other items used for sacrificial rites, precious objects that found their way to various institutions through inheritance by way of gifts from Byzantine emperors. The pattern of concealment is consistent whether one looks at Rome or at a locked cellar in Jerusalem. The items exist, Eyewitnesses attest to them, and the institutions guarding them are not talking. The Six-Day War cracked open the old city of Jerusalem and handed it back to the Jewish people. A professor stumbled into a dark room and saw what he recognized without any doubt. The insurance investigators needed him. The church said that there was nothing to see. The professor called them bluffers, and the cellar, with its hidden side door and its bars and its staircase going down, sits today beneath a 12th century Crusader church flying the flag of France, a country that does not recognize that Jerusalem is ours. The question is not whether these vessels exist. The question is whether we are yet in a generation worthy of receiving them. So, interesting. I didn't know that France did not recognize Jerusalem as Israel's.
I didn't either.
So,
They a lot of Europe didn't. I mean, after World War II, they set up camps in the UK to house all these Jews in, and Truman himself had to get them out of there and take a role in setting up Israel. So, because the camps were just almost as bad as they were in Europe.
yep. Well, we have gone a long time here.
Yep,
So,
we've done all we can do.
we've done all we can do this time. I have more things I'd like to cover, but it'll have to wait till a later time. But we're happy that Richard got to join us again this evening. And
Yay.
yay. And so, again, I mentioned pray for Nancy, his lovely wife, who's still in the hospital, but pray that,
Pray
miraculously.
that her kidneys recover.
Yes.
Yep. And her heart gets going better and that she can come home. So.
Yeah.
And tomorrow evening is Shabbat. I'm sure Larry will be bringing us a message again. So if you want to tune in to see that, you can. And if you want to keep our program coming your way, Jim will tell you how.
If you'd like to make a donation, you can send it through the mail to Truth in Life Today, 1301 Enterprise Way, Suite 63, Marion, Illinois, 62959. That's Truth in Life Today, 1301 Enterprise Way, Suite 63, Marion, Illinois, 62959. And in your envelope, stick a little note in there. Tell us how you'd like your donation to be used.
Yes. And we come to your way every Thursday evening at 7 p.m. And so if you want to keep us coming, help support us. Otherwise, until we see you again, same time, same place, shalom, everyone.
Shalom.
So